They called Elara Silverwood the defective daughter, the wolf who could barely shift, whose scent was too faint to track, whose value lay only in the ancient bloodline that ran through her veins. In the hierarchy of the Silver Pines pack, she was the last offering, the final sacrifice to appease the fearsome Alpha King Kale of Blackcrest. She expected chains. She expected cruelty. She expected to surrender her freedom for her family's safety, disappearing like morning mist into the shadows of his obsidian castle. What she never expected was to find a king haunted by secrets darker than her own fears, a ruler whose golden eyes held not just the savagery of legend, but a solitude that mirrored her lifelong isolation. As the crown settled upon her brow, and his blood-soaked legacy became intertwined with her own, Elara discovered that sometimes the most broken souls recognize each other in ways that destiny itself could never foresee. For in the cold halls of Blackcrest, where ancient magic stirred and enemies plotted from within, perhaps the true mate bond wasn't something bestowed by fate, but something forged through choice, through seeing beyond the scars to the worth beneath. And perhaps the greatest act of salvation would not be her sacrifice for her clan, but her refusal to let a wounded king surrender to the darkness that had claimed him long before she arrived. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The day Elara Silverwood was to be wed, the sky wept as if in mourning. Rain drummed against the carriage windows, matching the erratic rhythm of her heart. The lush forests of her homeland had given way to barren hills dotted with gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching skyward like the hands of drowning men. Fitting, she thought, for her journey to the kingdom of a monster. "We'll be arriving soon, my lady," her handmaiden Mira whispered, reaching across to straighten the silver circlet nestled in Elara's dark hair. "The castle of King Kale is just beyond that ridge." Elara nodded, unable to find her voice. Her fingers trembled as they traced the intricate embroidery of her wedding gown, silver thread woven through midnight blue fabric, the colors of her clan. Perhaps her last connection to the family she was leaving behind. The carriage crested the hill, and there it stood, Blackcrest Castle. Its obsidian towers pierced the stormy sky, each spire tipped with iron that gleamed dully in the half-light. No flags flew from those towers. The Alpha King needed no banners to announce his presence. The castle itself was statement enough, a fortress of stone and shadow, bordered by a moat that looked black as ink from this distance. "They say he built it atop the ruins of his enemies," Mira murmured, making the sign of the moon across her chest. "That the foundations run red with the blood of the clans he conquered." "Those are stories to frighten children," Elara replied, though her mouth had gone dry. "And I am no child." No, she was 20 summers old, a woman grown, a sacrifice. 3 weeks prior, the Alpha King's envoys had arrived at her father's doorstep. Their message had been clear: either offer a daughter of the Silverwood bloodline as bride to King Kale, or watch their ancestral lands burn and their people scattered to the winds. Her father, the aging Alpha of the Silver Pines pack, had wept that night. "It should be Lyra," her mother had insisted, referring to Elara's older sister. Beautiful, powerful Lyra, with her perfect shifting abilities and combat prowess. She would bring honor to our family name. But her father had shaken his head. "Lyra is to be mated to the son of the Eastern Alpha. That alliance cannot be broken." His eyes had fallen on Elara, sitting quietly in the corner, as they always did when disappointment was to follow. "It will have to be Elara, the defective daughter, the one whose wolf form was small and weak, who could barely hold her shift for more than an hour, whose growl sounded more like a pup's whimper, the daughter they could afford to lose." The carriage lurched, drawing Elara back to the present as they passed through massive iron gates. Guards lined the stone pathway leading to the castle entrance. Men with eyes like winter and expressions carved from granite. Not one looked directly at her carriage. "They fear him," Mira whispered, clutching Elara's hand. "Even his own men." "As do we all," Elara replied, squeezing back. "But fear will not save my family, so I will do what must be done." The carriage stopped, and Elara took a steadying breath. This was the moment her life ended, and her duty began. A guard opened the carriage door. Rain immediately pelted her face, cold and sharp, but Elara did not flinch. She stepped out with as much grace as she could muster, Mira following close behind, clutching a cloak over both their heads. The castle entrance loomed before them, a massive doorway framed by statues of snarling wolves. Beyond the threshold stood a woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her posture rigid as a blade. "Lady Alara Silverwood," the woman announced, her voice carrying despite the storm. "I am Lady Helena, housekeeper of Blackcrest Castle. You are expected. No welcome, no warmth, just the cold acknowledgement of a transaction completed." Alara followed Lady Helena through towering doors into a great hall, lit by hanging chandeliers filled with hundreds of candles. Their light reflected off polished stone floors and illuminated tapestries depicting wolves in battle, their fangs bared in eternal snarls. "The ceremony will take place at dusk," Lady Helena said, leading them up a winding staircase. "You will be prepared in your chambers until then. The king has arranged for appropriate attire." "I brought my own wedding gown," Alara said, gesturing to the trunks being carried behind them. Lady Helena's lips thinned to a bloodless line. "The king has arranged for appropriate attire," she repeated, emphasizing each word as if speaking to a dim-witted child. Alara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from responding. First battle lost, she thought. There would be others worth fighting. Her chambers were spacious but cold, dominated by a four-poster bed draped in dark furs and velvet. A fireplace occupied one wall, flames already dancing to combat the chill. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of craggy mountains shrouded in mist. "A servant will bring hot water for bathing," Lady Helena said. "The dress is in the wardrobe. I suggest you rest before the ceremony." With that, she turned on her heel and left, the door closing heavily behind her. Mira immediately went to Alara, unfastening her travel cloak. "Well, this is—" she began, then stopped, clearly unable to find an optimistic word. "It's what we expected," Alara finished for her, moving to the window. From this height, she could see beyond the castle walls to where a village sprawled in the valley below. Smoke rose from chimneys, and tiny figures moved through muddy streets. People living their lives, unaware of the sacrifice happening in the castle above them. Would they be her people now? Would she ever walk among them? "Let's see what our gracious host expects me to wear," Alara said, crossing to the massive wardrobe. Inside hung a single gown of deep crimson, almost the color of freshly spilled blood. Its bodice was adorned with black gems that glittered like beetle shells in the firelight. "Red," Mira whispered, "the color of the Blackcrest pack." "Of course," Alara replied. "He's marking me as his property before we even exchange vows." A knock at the door announced the arrival of servants with steaming water. Alara allowed them to fill the copper tub positioned near the fire, noting how they kept their eyes downcast and spoke not a word. When they left, she sank into the water, letting the heat seep into her bones. "What do you know of him?" she asked Mira, who was unpacking their few belongings. "Not the stories or the rumors, actual facts." Mira hesitated. "He ascended to the throne 15 years ago, after his father was killed in the Northern Wars. He was only 20 then, but already a feared warrior. Within 3 years, he'd united the 7 major packs under his rule, some through alliance, most through conquest. And his queen? There must have been one before me." Mira shook her head. "None, my lady. He's had no mate, no consort. Some say—" She trailed off, busying herself with folding a nightgown. "Some say what?" Alara pressed. "Some say he's incapable of the bond, that something in him is broken. That's why he's never taken a mate despite being 35 now." Alara sank deeper into the water. An alpha without a mate bond was unheard of. All alphas, once they reached maturity, felt the pull toward their destined partner. It was one of the great moon's gifts to their kind, the certainty of a perfect match. Unless the stories were true, unless King Kale was not just cruel, but cursed. Perhaps that's why he demanded a bride, Alara mused. If he cannot have a true mate, he'll settle for a political alliance. Or perhaps he simply needs an heir, Mira suggested. He's not getting any younger, and a kingdom needs succession. The thought sent a cold shiver through Alara despite the hot water. She would be expected to bear the Alpha King's children, to give her body to a man she'd never met, a man feared throughout the 7 packs. By the time she emerged from the bath, the sun was already beginning its descent. Mira helped her dress, the crimson gown heavier than it had appeared. The bodice cinched her waist painfully, and the black gems scratched against her skin. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style, with rubies woven through the braids. When she looked in the mirror, A stranger stared back, a pale woman in the colors of blood and night, her silver eyes the only familiar feature remaining. "You look like a queen," Mira whispered, but Alara only saw a sacrifice dressed for the altar. A sharp knock announced Lady Helena's return. The older woman's eyes swept over Alara, a hint of approval in her otherwise stony expression. "It is time," she said. "The ceremony awaits. Your handmaiden will remain here." Mira clutched Alara's hand. "My lady, I'll be fine," Alara assured her, though her heart threatened to burst from her chest. "Wait for me here." The walk to the great hall felt like a march to execution. Guards lined the corridors, their faces impassive as Alara passed. Servants paused in their duties to bow, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and pity. Lady Helena stopped at a set of towering doors, carved with wolves and ravens. "The king awaits inside," she said, "as do the representatives of the 7 packs. You will enter when the horns sound. Walk to the altar and kneel before your king." Alara's spine stiffened. "I am the daughter of an alpha. I bow my head to my mate, but I do not kneel." For the first time, something like respect flickered in Lady Helena's eyes. "Nevertheless, you will kneel," she said, "unless you wish to begin your marriage by defying the Alpha King before all his lords." Before Alara could respond, horns blared from within the hall, 3 long, mournful notes that seemed to vibrate through the stone beneath her feet. "Go," Lady Helena urged, as servants pulled the massive doors open. The great hall had been transformed. Hundreds of candles illuminated the space, their light reflecting off polished armor and jeweled throats. On either side of a central aisle stood the nobles of the 7 packs, their finery a riot of colors against the gray stone walls. And at the far end, upon a dais of black marble, stood the Alpha King. Ilara's first thought was that he was taller than she'd expected, towering over even his largest guards. His shoulders were broad beneath a cloak of midnight fur, his posture that of a predator at rest. His face, framed by hair as black as a raven's wing, might have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and unyielding planes, but it was his eyes that held her frozen at the threshold. Even from this distance, they burned like molten gold, fixed on her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. Music began, drums and pipes playing an ancient mating melody. Ilara forced herself to move, to place one foot before the other. She felt the weight of hundreds of stairs as she walked the seemingly endless aisle, the red train of her gown trailing behind her like spilled wine. With each step, the Alpha King's features became clearer. A scar bisected his right eyebrow, another slashed across his jaw. His mouth was set in a grim line, his expression unreadable as she approached. When she reached the dais, Ilara stopped. The music ceased. Silence descended, thick as winter fog. "Kneel," commanded a voice to her left, an elderly man in ceremonial robes. Ilara hesitated, remembering her own words. "I am the daughter of an alpha. I do not kneel." Then her eyes met the Alpha King's, and what she saw there was not the cruelty she'd expected, but something else, something watchful and wary. Slowly, deliberately, Ilara sank to her knees on the cold marble. The elderly man, a priest of the moon, judging by his robes, began the ceremony, invoking ancient rites of binding and promises of fealty. But Ilara barely heard the words. Her focus remained fixed on the man before her, trying to reconcile the monster of legend with the flesh-and-blood alpha, whose scent now reached her, pine and smoke, and something wilder, like a forest before a storm. "Rise," the king said suddenly, interrupting the priest mid-blessing. His voice was deep, roughened like stone weathered by harsh elements. It was the first word he had spoken, and it sent a tremor down Ilara's spine. She stood, legs unsteady beneath the heavy gown. "You are Ilara of Clan Silverwood," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "I am," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady. The king circled her slowly, his steps silent despite his size. She felt his gaze like a physical touch, assessing, calculating. "They sent me the defective daughter," he said, loud enough for those nearest to hear. A ripple of whispers spread through the hall. The one who cannot hold her wolf form. The one with no fighting skills. Heat rose to Ilara's cheeks. How did he know these things? Had her own family shared her weaknesses with him? "I am still of alpha blood," she replied, lifting her chin. "My bloodline is pure back 10 generations. Bloodlines," the king scoffed. I care little for ancient names or who coupled with whom centuries ago. He stopped before her, golden eyes burning into hers. I care for strength, for loyalty, for truth. Then I will give you truth, Alpha King, Ilara said, her heart pounding against her ribs. I am here because my family had no choice. I am here to save my people from your wrath. I am here as a sacrifice, not as a willing bride. Gasps echoed through the hall. Lady Helena looked stricken. The priest clutched his ceremonial staff as if it might shield him from the king's inevitable rage. But the Alpha King's lips curved in what might almost be called a smile, though it held no warmth. Truth, he said softly. Perhaps there is strength in you after all, Ilara Silverwood. He turned to the priest. Continue. I will have this union sealed before nightfall. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. Vows were exchanged, ancient words spoken. A ribbon wound around their joined hands. Through it all, the king's expression remained unreadable, his eyes never leaving Ilara's face. When the final blessing was pronounced, he turned to the assembled nobles. Behold your queen, he announced, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the hall. Any who dispute this union dispute me. Any who dishonor her dishonor me. She is mine now, as are all of you. With that declaration, he offered Ilara his arm. There was nothing to do but take it, his muscle like iron beneath her fingertips. Together, they walked back down the aisle, now husband and wife, Alpha and Luna, king and queen. A feast followed in a smaller hall. Though smaller, was relative within Blackcrest Castle. 50 tables filled the space, each laden with game and fruit and wine. At the high table, Ilara sat beside her new husband, acutely aware of the empty space between them, despite their physical proximity. The king ate little and spoke less, responding to nobles who approached with curt nods or single-word answers. None dared to sit, all standing at a respectful distance from the high table, as if the king's temper might flare at any moment. You should eat, he said to Ilara, noticing her untouched plate. The night will be long. The implication behind his words sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. The bedding, of course. The final part of any mating ceremony, the physical union that would seal their bond. Except there would be no true bond for them, no magical connection of souls as there would be between true mates. Just the mechanical joining of bodies to fulfill a contract. I find my appetite has abandoned me, my lord, she replied. Kale, he said, surprising her. In private, you will call me Kale. I have no need for formalities behind closed doors. She nodded, uncertain how to respond. This small concession to intimacy seemed at odds with his fearsome reputation. As the feast dragged on, Ilara observed her new husband from beneath lowered lashes. He was not what she had expected. The stories had painted him as a brute, a berserker who reveled in bloodshed and conquest. Yet the man beside her seemed controlled, contained, like a weapon sheathed but ever ready. After what felt like hours, he stood. The hall immediately fell silent. The feast continues, he announced, but your king and his new queen retire. Raucous cheers erupted, along with crude jokes about the night to come. Ilara's cheeks burned as Kale led her from the hall, his hand firm against the small of her back. They walked in silence through torchlit corridors, climbing 2 flights of stairs before reaching a set of double doors, guarded by stern-faced men. They bowed low as the king approached, opening the doors without a word. The royal chambers were vast, a sitting area with plush chairs before a roaring fire, bookshelves lining one wall, and beyond, visible through another doorway, an enormous bed draped in furs. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Kale released her and strode to a table where a decanter of amber liquid waited. He poured 2 glasses, offering one to Ilara. For your nerves, he said. You look as if you might shatter. Ilara accepted the glass but did not drink. I would prefer a clear head, my low. Kale. He studied her for a moment, then nodded, setting his own glass aside untouched. As you wish. An awkward silence fell between them. Ilara stood stiffly, uncertain what was expected of her now. Should she begin undressing? Should she wait for his command? The etiquette of bedding a feared warlord had not been covered in her upbringing. You may sleep in the adjoining chamber, Kale said abruptly, gesturing to a smaller door she hadn't noticed. It's prepared for you. Confusion replaced fear. But the consummation will wait, he finished for her. I did not bring you here to force myself upon an unwilling bride. If we share a bed, it will be by mutual desire, not obligation." Alara stared at him, speechless. Of all the scenarios she had imagined for this night, this had not been among them. "Why?" she finally managed. Kale's expression darkened. "Contrary to what you may have heard, I am not a monster who takes pleasure in another's fear or pain." He turned away, moving to stand before the fire. "We are bound by law and ceremony now. That is enough for what I require. And what is it you require of me? If not that." He looked over his shoulder, his profile sharp against the firelight. "Your presence, your loyalty, your counsel perhaps in time, your friendship, if such a thing is possible between us." Alara took a step toward him, drawn by the unexpected vulnerability in his voice. "And what of children? An heir?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "That concern is premature. For now I need only a queen who will stand beside me when I face my enemies." "Enemies? I thought you had conquered all who opposed you." A mirthless laugh escaped him. "There are always enemies, Alara. Some merely hide their fangs better than others." He gestured to the small door again. "Go. Rest. Tomorrow you begin your duties as queen." Still bemused by this unexpected reprieve, Alara moved toward the door, but something made her pause, her hand on the latch. "Thank you," she said softly, "for your consideration tonight." Kale's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them. Not the mate bond of legend, but something quieter, an understanding, perhaps. "Good night, Queen Alara," he said, his voice low and rough. "Good night, Alpha King," she replied, and slipped through the door to her chamber. The room beyond was smaller, but no less luxurious than the main chamber. A fire burned in a hearth half the size of the one she'd just left, warming a space dominated by a comfortable-looking bed. Her trunks had been placed at its foot, and Mira stood from a chair by the fire at her entrance. "My lady," the handmaiden exclaimed, rushing to her. Did he—" "I am unharmed," Alara assured her, allowing Mira to help her out of the heavy gown. "The king has granted me privacy for the night." Mira's brow furrowed in confusion. "But the union will wait, apparently." Alara sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. The fear and tension of the day had drained her completely. "He is not what I expected, Mira." "In what way?" Alara shook her head, unable to articulate the complexity of her first impressions. "I don't know yet, but perhaps this arrangement will not be as terrible as we feared." As she lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Blackcrest Castle settling around her, Alara wondered about the man sleeping on the other side of the wall. Alpha King Kale, the unifier, the conqueror, the terror of the northern packs. A man who had spared her dignity when he had every right to claim her body. A man with secrets, she was certain. A man with depths that the stories had never mentioned. A man she now belonged to, for better or worse. Outside her window, the clouds parted briefly, allowing moonlight to spill across her bed. Alara touched the silver light, remembering an old prayer her mother had taught her. "Great moon," she whispered, "guide my path in darkness. Grant me strength for the journey ahead, and if it be your will, grant me understanding of the man to whom you have bound me." The clouds closed again, plunging the room back into shadow. But as Alara drifted toward sleep, she thought she felt a presence, warm and watchful, hovering at the edges of her consciousness. Not a mate bond, surely. Something else. Something that whispered of secrets waiting to be discovered in the heart of Blackcrest Castle. Morning arrived with tentative sunlight filtering through Alara's window. She awoke disoriented, reality settling upon her as she recognized the dark wood furnishings and crimson draperies of Blackcrest Castle. She was queen now, wife to the Alpha King. A soft knock announced Mira's presence. The handmaiden entered carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, my queen," she said, her voice tinged with newfound reverence. "Please don't," Alara sighed. "I'm still just Alara to you. The castle is already abuzz with talk," Mira whispered, glancing at the connecting door to the king's chamber. "They say the marriage wasn't consummated," Alara finished. "No, it wasn't. He simply chose not to claim his rights last night." A sharp knock interrupted them. Lady Helena entered, her iron-gray hair already immaculately arranged despite the early hour. "The king requests your presence at the morning council meeting," she announced. "I'm to help you prepare." Alara nearly choked on her tea. "Council meeting? Already?" You are queen, Lady Helena stated matter-of-factly. Your place is at the king's side during matters of state. Within the hour, Alara found herself dressed in a gown of deep forest green trimmed with silver. A delicate silver crown adorned her head. The crown belonged to the king's mother, Lady Helena explained as she adjusted it. Queen Isabella was much beloved before her passing. How did she die? Alara asked. Lady Helena's expression shuddered. That is not my story to tell, Your Majesty. Alara followed the housekeeper through a maze of corridors until they reached a circular chamber dominated by a massive round table. Around it sat a dozen men, and at the head sat Kyle, his massive frame making his ornate chair seem almost delicate. All conversation ceased as Alara entered. The men rose as one, bowing toward her with varying degrees of sincerity. Gentlemen, Kyle said, your queen honors us with her presence. He gestured to an empty chair at his right, a position of highest honor. We were discussing the border situation, he continued once she was seated. Lord Thorne, please continue your report. A grizzled man with a scar running from temple to jaw cleared his throat. The Eastern Outposts report increased activity from beyond the border. Scouts have observed armed bands moving through the forests at night. Raiders? Asked a younger lord. Lord Thorne shook his head. Too organized for common bandits. They move with purpose. Toward what? Alara found herself asking, then immediately regretted speaking as all eyes turned to her. But Kyle nodded, as if her question was perfectly natural. Toward the ancient temple ruins, he answered. A place of power from the old days, before the Great Division. You believe they seek something within the ruins? She asked. Lord Thorne nodded. That is our suspicion, Your Majesty. The question, Kyle said, his voice hardening, is who they are and what they hope to find. The discussion continued, delving into patrol schedules and defensive strategies. Alara listened intently, surprised that no one questioned her presence. When the meeting concluded 2 hours later, Kyle remained seated, watching the council members file out. You surprised them, he said once they were alone. They didn't expect you to understand military strategy or border politics. Alara straightened in her chair. My father may have considered me defective, but he didn't neglect my education. A ghost of a smile touched Kyle's lips. I'm beginning to think your father was a fool to underestimate you so severely. Thank you for including me today, she said carefully. You are queen, he replied simply. Your perspective is valuable, especially as you come from outside our court. He stood, offering his arm. Come, I'll show you the castle properly. You should know your new home. Together, they walked through the labyrinthine corridors of Blackcrest, Kyle pointing out the locations of the library, training grounds, healing chambers, and kitchens. You're giving me free reign of the castle? She asked, surprised. Should I confine you to certain areas? He countered. Are you a prisoner, Alara? Am I not? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kale stopped walking, turning to face her fully. You are my queen, not my captive, he said, his voice low and intense. This marriage may have begun as a political arrangement, but that doesn't mean it must remain a cage for either of us. Their tour ended at a massive set of doors leading to the castle gardens. Inside was not the manicured flower beds Alara had expected, but a wild natural space with ancient trees, moss-covered stones, and winding paths disappearing into dense foliage. This is my mother's legacy, Kyle said, his voice softening. She believed nature should be honored, not tamed. It's beautiful, Alara said honestly. I come here when the weight of the crown becomes too much, Kyle admitted. Few others enter this space. They sat on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak. Your mother, Alara said carefully. Will you tell me about her? A shadow passed over Kyle's features. My mother was different. She came from a small, insignificant pack to the south. She believed in balance, between strength and compassion, between tradition and progress. She sounds wise, Alara said softly. She was, Kale agreed, grief coloring his words. She was also murdered when I was 15. Alara's breath caught. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Few do. The official story is that she fell ill and died peacefully. But I found her body. I saw the poison that blackened her lips. Did you find who did it? Kale's expression darkened. Not yet, but I will. It's why I united the packs. Why I built this kingdom. Somewhere among the noble houses lurks the one who ordered her death. Is that why you've never taken a mate? She asked. Because you've been focused on finding her killer? He looked at her sharply. "What have you heard about my situation?" "Only rumors. That perhaps you cannot form the mate bond." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Is that what they say? That I'm broken? Cursed?" He shook his head. "The truth is both simpler and more complicated. I've never sought a mate because a mate would be a vulnerability, another target for my enemies. But you married me," Alara pointed out. "A political marriage is different from a mate bond," he said. "You're valuable as a symbol, as a diplomatic tie to your clan, but we aren't bound by soul. If something happened to you," he trailed off, "I would seek justice, of course, but it wouldn't destroy me." His frank assessment shouldn't have stung, but it did. Alara looked away. "I apologize if that sounds cold," Kyle said after a moment. "But I promised you truth yesterday. I won't start offering pretty lies today." "I appreciate honesty," Alara replied. "I understand your reasoning. I too entered this marriage with practical expectations. We may not have chosen each other, Alara, but perhaps we can choose to make this arrangement work to both our advantages. An alliance of minds, if not hearts." He extended his hand toward her. "Partners?" She placed her hand in his. "Partners." A week passed in a blur of new routines. Alara attended council meetings each morning, gradually contributing more as she gained confidence. Afternoons were spent in the library, studying the kingdom's history and laws, or in the gardens, finding peace among the wild growth. Each evening they dined together, discussing the day's events. To Alara's surprise, these conversations flowed easily, their minds working in complementary ways despite their different backgrounds. They continued to sleep in separate chambers, though rumors undoubtedly circulated about the unconsummated royal marriage. On the 8th night after their wedding, an urgent knock sounded at Alara's door. Lady Helena stood there, her normally composed face tight with concern. "The king requires your presence immediately, Your Majesty," she said. "In the throne room." "What's happened?" Alara asked as they hurried through the corridors. "A messenger arrived from the border," Lady Helena replied grimly. "Bleeding and half dead. Whatever news he carried, it's grave enough that the king has summoned all council members." The throne room was already filled with advisors and military commanders when Alara entered. Kyle stood on the dais, his face a mask of controlled fury. "What's happened?" she asked quietly. "The eastern outpost has been attacked," he replied, his voice tight. 30 of our best warriors dead. The temple ruins have been breached." Lord Thorne approached. The survivor reports that the attackers were led by a man with a silver wolf head staff. They knew exactly where our sentries were positioned. "A traitor," Kale growled. "Someone has been feeding information to our enemies." "But who are they?" Alara asked. Kale's expression darkened further. "According to our messenger, they bore the mark of the Silver Circle." A chill ran through Alara. The Silver Circle was a near-mythical organization. Werewolves who practiced the old magic, who believed in returning to the days before the Great Division, when wolves had ruled openly among humans. "I thought they were destroyed generations ago," she said. "So did we all," Lord Thorne replied grimly. "It seems we were mistaken." Kale turned to the assembled council. "I ride for the eastern border at dawn," he announced. "Lord Thorne will accompany me, along with my elite guard. Lord Varys will oversee the castle's defenses in my absence." "And what of the Queen?" asked an elderly advisor. "The Queen," Kale said, "will rule in my stead until I return." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. Alara couldn't hide her shock. "My lords," Kale continued, his tone brooking no argument, "Queen Alara has proven her intelligence and judgment in council. She has my full confidence, and she will have your complete obedience in my absence." One by one, the council members bowed to Alara, pledging their loyalty. As the meeting concluded, Kyle drew Alara aside, leading her to a small antechamber. "I know this is unexpected," he said once they were alone, "but I believe you are capable. You're entrusting your entire kingdom to someone you've known for barely a week," Alara pointed out. "I'm entrusting it to my queen," he corrected. "A queen who has shown more wisdom and insight in 1 week than some of my advisors have in years." Alara studied him. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked finally. "There's more to this decision than confidence in my abilities." A flicker of surprise crossed Kale's face. "Perceptive," he murmured. "Yes, there is another reason. I believe the traitor feeding information to the Silver Circle is among my council. And you think they might reveal themselves while you're away?" They'll see your appointment as regency as a sign of weakness, Cale said, nodding. They'll attempt to undermine you, perhaps even openly defy you. In doing so, they may expose themselves. So I'm bait, Alara concluded. You're a hunter, Cale corrected, and they are prey who don't yet realize they're being stalked. Despite herself, Alara felt a thrill at the challenge. And if I identify the traitor? Observe, gather evidence, but do not confront them directly. Cale's expression hardened. That pleasure will be mine when I return. How long will you be gone? 2 weeks, 3 at most. He hesitated, then added, I wouldn't leave if I didn't believe it was necessary, and if I didn't trust you to handle matters here. I won't disappoint you, she promised. Cale reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture so gentle it startled her. I know you won't, he said softly. Then, as if catching himself, he stepped back, his expression becoming neutral once more. I leave at first light. We should both rest while we can. As she turned to leave, Cale's voice stopped her. Alara. She looked back at him. Be careful, he said. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. With that warning, he strode past her, leaving Alara alone with the weight of a kingdom suddenly resting on her shoulders. Dawn broke cold and misty as Alara stood in the courtyard watching Cale and his warriors prepare to depart. 50 men, all elite fighters, mounted on powerful steeds that pawed restlessly at the cobblestones. Cale himself sat atop a massive black stallion, his armor gleaming dully in the weak morning light. He looked every inch the warrior king of legend, imposing, dangerous, untouchable. Yet when his eyes found Alara's, something passed between them that belied that untouchability, something almost warm. He guided his horse to where she stood. Remember, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Trust your instincts. They're sharper than you realize. I will, she promised. Then, surprising herself, she added, Return safely, my king. The corner of Cale's mouth lifted slightly. Is that concern I hear, my queen? Merely practical consideration, she replied. I've just begun to understand how this kingdom works. It would be inconvenient to start over with a new husband. A genuine laugh escaped him, drawing startled glances from nearby guards who had likely never heard such a sound from their stern ruler. Then for the sake of convenience, he said, his golden eyes glinting with something like mischief, I shall endeavor to return with all limbs intact. Before Alara could respond, he leaned down from his saddle, his hand cupping the back of her neck with unexpected gentleness. For one heart-stopping moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, his forehead pressed against hers in the traditional wolf gesture of pack affection. Until we meet again, little wolf, he murmured, then straightened and wheeled his horse around. With a signal to his men and a final nod to Alara, the Alpha King rode through the gates of Blackcrest Castle, leaving his new queen to guard both his throne and his secrets. 3 weeks passed with no word from the Alpha King, and Alara found herself pacing the ramparts of Blackcrest Castle each evening, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of returning riders. What had been meant as a fortnight's absence had stretched into nearly a month, and whispers of concern now shadowed the corridors of the castle. Your Majesty, Lady Helena said, approaching Alara on the eastern wall, you should come inside. The night grows cold. Alara pulled her cloak tighter, but did not move. Any word from the scouts? The older woman's expression softened with rare compassion. Nothing yet, but the king is a formidable warrior. Whatever delays him, I'm certain he will return. The words were meant to comfort, but Alara heard the undercurrent of worry. Lady Helena had known Cale since he was a boy. If she was concerned, there was reason to be. 3 days, Alara said finally. If we hear nothing in 3 days, I will send reinforcements to the eastern border. As she followed Lady Helena back inside, Alara mentally reviewed the events of the past weeks. Her regency had begun smoothly enough. She'd handled routine matters of governance, settled minor disputes among nobles, and continued attending daily council meetings. But as days passed without the king's return, resistance to her authority had grown. Lord Varys had been the first to challenge her openly, questioning her decision to reallocate guards from the northern watchtowers to strengthen the eastern border. Others soon followed his lead. Small acts of defiance, delayed responses to orders, whispered conversations that ceased when she entered a room, just as Cale had predicted. Alara had observed carefully, noting which lords most frequently aligned with Lord Varys, which servants carried messages between council members after hours, which guards seemed to report to someone other than their designated captains. She'd compiled her suspicions in a leather-bound journal, kept locked in a hidden compartment of her writing desk. But suspicion was not proof, and without Cale, she lacked the authority to make accusations against high-ranking nobles, especially when she still felt like an outsider in many ways. In the Great Hall, dinner was being served to the remaining council members. Alara took her seat at the head of the table, Kyle's seat, feeling the weight of the ornately carved chair like a physical burden. "My lords," she greeted them, noting the slight delay in their rising to acknowledge her. Another small defiance. "Your Majesty," Lord Varys said, his silver-streaked beard neatly trimmed, his blue eyes cold as winter ice. "We were just discussing the grain allocation for the western villages. With winter approaching, supplies must be carefully rationed." "Indeed," Alara agreed, unfolding her napkin. "I've reviewed the steward's reports. Our reserves are sufficient if distributed prudently." "The steward reports to me," Lord Varys said, his tone sharpening. "I would have appreciated being consulted before you reviewed his findings." Alara met his gaze steadily. "The steward reports to the crown. In the king's absence, that means me." A tense silence followed. Around the table, other lords shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "Of course," Lord Varys finally conceded, though his expression remained mutinous. "I merely meant no distress should burden you with such mundane concerns when you must have more womanly pursuits to occupy your time." Several lords failed to hide their smirks. Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her composure, reminded of countless similar dismissals from her father's advisors back home. "How fortunate, then," she replied, keeping her voice level, "that I am capable of managing both my womanly pursuits and the responsibilities of governance simultaneously, a skill I find many men lack." Lord Harwick, an elderly advisor who had shown Alara consistent respect, coughed to hide a laugh. Lord Varys's face darkened. "Perhaps," he said tightly, "your confidence stems from the knowledge that the king will soon return to correct any missteps in your leadership." "Is that a concern of yours, Lord Varys?" Alara asked, loading her tone with innocent curiosity. "That the king might find fault with decisions made in his absence." Before he could respond, the doors to the great hall burst open. A guard rushed in, his armor spattered with mud, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Your Majesty," he gasped, bowing hastily. "Riders approach from the east. The king's banner flies among them, but they move slowly. There appear to be wounded." Alara was on her feet instantly. "How many riders?" "Perhaps 20, Your Majesty. Less than half those who departed." A chill ran through her. "Prepare the healing chambers. Send for every healer in the castle, and have the kitchens prepare hot broth and bread." She turned to the council. "My lords, your assistance, please. We must organize to receive our wounded." Most rose immediately to comply, but Lord Varys remained seated, his eyes calculating. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, you should retire to your chambers. The sight of battle wounds can be most distressing to delicate sensibilities." Alara's patience snapped. "Lord Varys, if your concern for my sensibilities prevents you from following direct orders, I suggest you retire to your own chambers until you recover your ability to serve your king and queen. The rest of you, with me." She swept from the hall, heart pounding, not just from worry for Cale, but from the confrontation. She had crossed a line, publicly rebuking one of the highest-ranking nobles in the kingdom. If Kyle did not support her action, she would have made a powerful enemy. But there was no time for second thoughts. She hurried to the castle gates, where guards and servants were already gathering with torches to light the way for the returning party. In the distance, moving slowly down the winding mountain road, Alara could see the flickering of torches and the dark shapes of riders. It seemed an eternity before the first horseman entered the courtyard. Lord Thorne led them, his weathered face grim, a bloody bandage wrapped around his arm. Behind him came soldiers in varying states of injury, some barely staying upright in their saddles. "My queen," Lord Thorne said, dismounting with a wince. "We come with heavy news." Alara's eyes scanned the group frantically. "The king! Where is the king?" Lord Thorne gestured to the rear of the party, where 4 soldiers carefully maneuvered a makeshift stretcher from horseback. Upon it lay a still figure covered with a fur cloak, stained dark with what could only be blood. "No," Alara breathed, rushing forward. Hands tried to hold her back, but she pushed through, reaching the stretcher as the soldiers lowered it to the ground. Kyle lay unmoving, his face ashen beneath streaks of dirt and blood. His armor had been removed, revealing a chest wrapped in bloodied bandages. His breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. "What happened?" she demanded, falling to her knees beside him. "Ambush!" Lord Thorne replied, his voice rough with exhaustion. "The Silver Circle had more forces than our scouts reported. They were waiting for us at the temple ruins. The king fought like a demon, but their leader, he wielded old magic, dark spells we've not seen in generations." "How long has he been like this?" 4 days. We've tried everything. Healing herbs, poultices, even blood rituals from the old ways. Nothing breaks the curse." "Curse?" Alara looked up sharply. Lord Thorne nodded grimly. "The wound itself isn't fatal, but it festers with magic that prevents healing. It's consuming him from within. Our healers say—" He hesitated. "Say what?" Alara pressed. "That he won't last the night." The world seemed to tilt around her. Alara looked down at Cale's face, at the proud features now drawn with pain, at the lips that had spoken of partnerships and truth, at the closed eyes that had gazed at her with respect, when all others saw only weakness. "Get him to the healing chambers," she ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. Now, the hours that followed passed in a blur of frantic activity. Healers swarmed around the king's bed, applying poultices, chanting ancient healing rites, trying every remedy known to their kind. Nothing worked. If anything, Cale seemed to weaken with each passing hour, his skin growing colder, his breathing more labored. Alara stayed by his side, dismissing suggestions that she rest or eat. She held his hand, so much larger than hers, yet now limp and unresponsive, and tried to make sense of the swirling emotions within her. This man was supposed to be her political alliance, her protection against enemies. A partner in governance, perhaps, but not someone whose fate should leave her feeling so utterly bereft. Yet the thought of him dying, of never again seeing those golden eyes flash with hidden humor, or hearing his deep voice soften when he spoke of his mother's garden, it hollowed her out from within. Near midnight, the chief healer approached her, his ancient face etched with sorrow. "My queen, we have tried everything within our power. The curse resists all conventional healing." "There must be something," Alara insisted. "Some remedy you haven't tried. Some ancient text you haven't consulted." The old man hesitated. "There is one possibility, but it requires something we do not possess." "What? Name it, and I will find it." "A true mate's bond," he said quietly. "The strongest magic known to our kind. It can break any curse, heal any wound. But the king has no mate," Alara finished for him. The healer nodded sadly. "I'm sorry, your majesty. Without that bond, I fear the king is beyond our help." Alara looked down at Cale's face, at the proud features now slack with approaching death. "Leave us," she whispered. "All of you." When the room had emptied, she leaned close to him, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "You stubborn, impossible man," she murmured. "You weren't supposed to matter to me. This was a political arrangement, remember? Partners in governance, not whatever this feeling is." She laid her head against his chest, listening to the faint, irregular beating of his heart. "I need you to live, Kyle. Not for the kingdom, not for your revenge, but for me. Because somehow, in these few weeks, you've become important to me, and I refuse to lose you before I understand why." In the silence that followed, Alara remembered stories her mother had told her, ancient legends of the first werewolves and the magic that flowed in their blood, of mate bonds so powerful they could transcend death itself, of wolves who, through sheer force of will, had called their mates back from the brink. "I am not your true mate," she whispered against his skin. "But perhaps what we've built is enough. A partnership freely chosen, rather than dictated by fate." Acting on instinct rather than knowledge, Alara shifted partially to her wolf form, something she rarely did given the weakness of her transformation. Fangs elongated in her mouth, sharp and purposeful. With a silent prayer to the great moon, she bit down on the juncture between Cale's neck and shoulder, her teeth breaking skin, tasting his blood. The claiming mark. The physical symbol of a mating bond. For a long moment, nothing happened. Alara pulled back, despair washing over her. Of course it hadn't worked. She wasn't his true mate. Her wolf was weak, her claim meaningless. Then Cale's body arched suddenly, a gasp tearing from his lips. His eyes flew open, glowing a brilliant gold in the dim chamber. His hand shot up, gripping Alara's arm with surprising strength. "Alara," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "What have you done?" Before she could answer, his body went rigid. A strangled cry escaped him as black lines appeared on his skin, spreading outward from the wound on his chest like dark veins. The curse, manifesting physically as it fought against her intervention. Alara watched in horror as the darkness crept up his neck, toward his face. Acting on pure instinct, she placed her hands on his chest, directly over the original wound, and closed her eyes. She had never been strong in the traditional werewolf ways. Her shift was weak, her senses dulled compared to others of her kind. But in this moment, she reached for something deeper than physical strength, the essence of what made her wolf, the primal connection to the moon and the earth that flowed in her blood, despite her limitations. "I claim you, Kale of Blackcrest," she whispered, feeling heat build beneath her palms. "Not by fate's decree, but by my choice. Your battles are my battles. Your pain is my pain. Your life is my life. By the great moon, I refuse to let you go." Something sparked between them, a current of energy that seared through Alara's veins like liquid fire. The heat beneath her hands intensified until it seemed her palms must surely burn. Kale's back arched again, a roar tearing from his throat that was more wolf than human. The black lines on his skin pulsed, then began to recede. Slowly at first, then faster, pulling back toward the original wound like poison being drawn from a bite. When they reached his chest, coalescing over his heart, Alara pressed harder, willing her energy, her life force, into him. "Live," she commanded. "Live, you stubborn wolf. Live for me." With a sound like shattering glass, the darkness dissipated. Kale collapsed back onto the bed, his chest rising and falling in deep, even breaths. The wound that had festered for days began to close before Alara's eyes, new pink skin forming over the angry red flesh. Exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. She swayed, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was Kale's face. Peaceful now, the lines of pain smoothed away, and the claiming mark on his neck, stark against his skin. Her mark, her claim, her king. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sensation of being watched. She blinked groggily, trying to orient herself. She lay in a massive bed, draped with rich furs. Kyle's bed, she realized. The royal chamber. "Welcome back," said a deep voice from beside her. She turned her head to find Kale sitting in a chair pulled close to the bedside. He was dressed simply in a loose white shirt and dark trousers, his feet bare. The pallor of near death had been replaced by healthy color, and his golden eyes were clear and alert. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked, her voice raspy from disuse. 2 days, he replied, leaning forward to pour water from a pitcher beside the bed. "You nearly drained yourself completely with that little stunt." He helped her sit up, supporting her back with one strong arm while holding the cup to her lips with the other. The simple act of drinking exhausted her, and she fell back against the pillows, frustrated by her weakness. "The healers say you'll recover fully with rest," Kale said, as if sensing her thoughts. "What you did, it should have been impossible." Alara's hand went to her throat, suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't know what else to do. They said only a mate bond could break the curse and you were dying, and I couldn't let that happen." Kale's expression softened, something warm and unnamed flickering in his eyes. "So you claimed me." "I know it's not the same as a true mate bond," she said quickly. "I know my wolf is weak, my claim probably meaningless in the eyes of tradition, but I had to try something." "Meaningless?" Kyle echoed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Look at my chest, little wolf." Confused, Alara's eyes dropped to where his shirt hung partially open. The wound that had been killing him was completely healed, leaving only a silvery scar in the shape of a crescent moon, the ancient symbol of a queen's protection. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Such marks were the stuff of legend, not reality. And yet here it is," Kale said, his hand covering the mark. "Just as your claim is here." He tilted his head, revealing the healed bite on his neck. Not a ragged wound, but a perfect imprint of her teeth, silvery against his tan skin. A queen's mark, a true mate's mark. Alara shook her head. "But I can't be your true mate. I would have felt it from the beginning. We both would have, perhaps," Kale mused. Or perhaps some bonds must be chosen rather than simply accepted. Perhaps we needed to see each other clearly before the bond could take root. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I felt you, Alara. When the darkness was consuming me, when I was slipping away, I felt your presence like a beacon calling me back. Your strength, your determination, your care for me. It worked both ways, she admitted quietly. These past weeks I've felt connected to you in ways I couldn't explain. I thought it was just growing affection, partnership. It was those things, Kale said, but also more. He hesitated, then added, You should know that the bond is not yet complete. For that to happen, we would need to... Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks. A small smile played at the corners of Kale's mouth. Yes, but that is a decision for another day, when you have recovered your strength. She studied his face, still hardly believing he was alive, that they were having this conversation. What happened at the temple? Lord Thorne said you were ambushed. Kale's expression darkened. The silver circle was waiting for us. They had already breached the inner sanctum of the temple, accessed the ancient magic stored there. Their leader, a wolf called Malachi, he's been searching for something. A ritual from the old days, something that could give him power over all werewolves. Did he find it? No. We managed to destroy the central chamber before he could complete the ritual. But in the fighting, Kyle's hand went to his chest, to the crescent scar. Malachi used a cursed blade, a death meant to be slow and painful. Alara's fingers tightened around his. He meant for you to suffer. Yes, and to leave my kingdom vulnerable without its king. Kale's eyes met hers, warm with unexpected pride. He didn't count on my queen being more formidable than anyone suspected. Lord Varys, Alara said suddenly, remembering her suspicions. I believe he's been working against you. During your absence, he consistently undermined my authority, and I found evidence he's been communicating with someone outside the castle using unofficial channels. Kale's expression hardened. I've had my doubts about Varys for some time. Did you gather proof? Notes, mostly. Patterns of behavior. Enough to warrant investigation, at least. Good. Kyle nodded approvingly. I knew you would see what others missed. He stood, stretching with the fluid grace of a predator. We'll deal with Varys soon. But first, there's something I want to show you. I'm not sure I can walk, Alara admitted, embarrassed by her weakness. Without a word, Kale scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Then I'll carry you, my queen. He bore her through the castle corridors, ignoring the startled looks of servants and guards they passed. Alara expected him to take her to the council chambers, or perhaps the garden, but instead, he climbed a narrow spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever, emerging finally onto the highest tower of Blackcrest Castle. The view took Alara's breath away. Mountains stretched in all directions, their peaks still capped with snow despite the spring warmth. Forests carpeted the valleys in rich green, and far in the distance, she could see the glint of a river winding its way toward the horizon. This is your kingdom now, Kyle said, setting her carefully on her feet, but keeping a supportive arm around her waist. Our kingdom. From the northern peaks to the southern plains, from the western forests to the eastern shores. Alara leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. It's beautiful, and endangered, he added soberly. The silver circle will not stop with one defeat. Malachi escaped, and he will try again to access the old magics. Then we'll stop him again, Alara said with quiet determination. Together. Kale turned to face her fully, his golden eyes intent on hers. When I took you as my wife, I thought I was gaining a political ally, a diplomatic tool, a symbol to unite our packs. His hand came up to cradle her cheek. I never expected to find a partner, someone who would challenge me, support me, save me. I never expected any of this either, Alara admitted. I came here as a sacrifice, believing my life was over. Instead I found purpose, strength I didn't know I possessed. And you. She placed her hand over his where it rested against her face. A man very different from the monster of legend. I am still that monster to my enemies, Kale said, his voice low. I am still the Alpha King who united 7 packs through conquest and blood. But with you, his thumb traced her lower lip. With you I can perhaps be more. Better. You already are, she whispered. The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. Kyle's lips were surprisingly gentle against hers, a question rather than a demand. Alara answered by leaning into him, her arms encircling his neck, as the kiss deepened into something more primal, more needful. She felt it then, the bond between them flaring to life like a flame catching dry tinder. Not just physical desire, but a deeper connection, a sense of rightness that resonated through her very bones. This was what the legends spoke of. This was what had been missing all her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alara saw her own wonder reflected in Cale's eyes. "It seems," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "that the defective daughter and the cursed king have found their perfect match after all." Alara laughed, the sound carried away by the mountain breeze. "My father will be furious when he discovers I've formed a true mate bond with the man he feared above all others." "Let him be furious," Cale growled, pulling her closer. "You are mine now, little wolf. My queen, my mate, and I am yours." "Yours," Alara agreed, feeling the truth of it in her very soul. "And you are mine to protect, as I am yours." Above them, clouds parted to reveal the faint outline of the moon, visible even in daylight. The great moon, witness to their bond, to the unexpected salvation they had found in each other. For Alara had come to Blackcrest as a sacrifice, expecting to save her clan through her submission. Instead, she had found her strength, her purpose, her true self, and in doing so, she had saved not just her people, but the man she now called mate, the Alpha King whose fearsome reputation hid a heart capable of love, of growth, of redemption. 3 months later, Alara stood once more upon the highest tower of Blackcrest Castle, watching as riders approached from the south. Her father's banner flew among them, the silver wolf on blue field that had once been her own symbol. "Are you ready for this?" Cale asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting atop her head. "To face my father? To show him that the daughter he considered worthless is now queen of the 7 packs? That the mate bond he never thought I'd form now connects me to the most powerful alpha in the land?" Alara leaned back against Cale's solid warmth. "Yes, I believe I'm ready." She felt more than heard his chuckle, the rumble of it vibrating against her back. "Remember, little wolf, he comes as a supplicant to our court. You hold the power now. We hold it," she corrected, turning in his arms to face him. Together, Cale's expression softened as he gazed down at her. In the months since her claiming, he had changed subtly but significantly. The cold mask he'd worn since his mother's death had begun to crack, revealing glimpses of the man beneath, a man capable of warmth, of laughter, of love. Not that his enemies would notice the difference. To them, he remained the implacable Alpha King, the conqueror who had unified 7 fractious packs under his rule. But to those closest to him, to Alara, to Lady Helena, to the inner circle of advisors who had proven their loyalty, he showed a different face. "You've been good for him," Lady Helena had told Alara just days ago, watching as Cale sparred with young warriors in the training yard, offering guidance rather than just criticism. He's becoming the king his mother always believed he could be. Now, as they prepared to receive Alara's family, that transformation seemed more evident than ever. The wounds that had festered within Kyle since his mother's murder were beginning to heal, not forgotten, but no longer defining his every action. "Lord Varys's trial begins tomorrow," Kyle said, his hand finding hers as they made their way down from the tower. "The evidence you gathered proved decisive. His correspondence with Malachi goes back years. And the search for your mother's killer?" Alara asked softly. A shadow crossed Cale's face. "Varys wasn't directly involved in her death, but his testimony has given us new leads. We're closer than we've ever been. We'll find them," Alara promised, squeezing his hand. "And when we do, we'll ensure justice is done." They reached the main courtyard just as the gates opened to admit the visitors from Clan Silverwood. At the head of the procession rode Alara's father, his once proud shoulders now slightly stooped, his expression wary as he surveyed the imposing fortress that now housed his youngest daughter. Beside him rode Lyra, Alara's beautiful, perfect sister, whose eyes widened at the sight of Blackcrest Castle's grandeur. Behind them came a retinue of guards and servants, all looking equally intimidated by their surroundings. Alara stepped forward, Cale at her side. She wore a gown of midnight blue embroidered with silver wolves, a deliberate echo of her clan's colors, but reimagined with the power and prestige of her new status. "Father," she greeted him as he dismounted. "Sister, welcome to Blackcrest Castle." Her father bowed low, deeper than protocol required. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice thick with an emotion Alara couldn't quite name. "You look well." "I am well," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Better than I have ever been." Kyle's hand came to rest at the small of her back, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by her father, whose eyes darted between them with growing understanding. "You've formed the bond," he said, sounding stunned. "A true mate bond, with the Alpha King." Alara lifted her chin. "I have. It seems my wolf was not so defective after all." Her father had the grace to look ashamed. "Alara, we feared for you when the king's envoys came. We thought we were sending you to a fate worse than death. Instead," Lyra interjected, stepping forward to embrace her sister, "you've become a queen, the most powerful Luna in the land." She pulled back, her eyes bright with wonder. "I always knew you were meant for greatness, even if no one else could see it." The sincerity in her sister's voice moved Alara unexpectedly. Perhaps there had been more support in her family than she'd realized, hidden beneath layers of tradition and expectation. "Come," she said, gesturing toward the castle entrance. "Rest from your journey. Tonight, we feast to celebrate new beginnings and strengthened alliances." As servants led her family away to their quarters, Alara remained in the courtyard with Kyle, watching as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. "You handled that well," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Gracious but not subservient. A true queen." "I had an excellent teacher in how to balance strength with diplomacy," she replied, smiling up at him. Kyle's answering smile, still rare enough to be precious, warmed her from within. "I believe, my queen, that in this as in many things, I have learned more from you than you from me." Together, they turned toward the castle, toward the future they were building, not just for themselves, but for all 7 packs now united under their rule. A future founded not on fear, but on respect, not on subjugation, but on partnership, not on power for its own sake, but on power wielded with wisdom and compassion. Alara had come to Blackcrest Castle as a sacrifice bride, expecting to save her clan through her submission to a monster. Instead, she had found her strength, her purpose, her mate, and in claiming him, in loving him, she had done what no conquest, no military victory, no political alliance could have achieved. She had saved the Alpha King from the darkness that threatened to consume him, not through weakness, but through courage, not through surrender, but through choice. And in doing so, she had transformed herself from the defective daughter into the Queen of Wolves, her strength no longer measured by the power of her shift, but by the strength of her heart, her mind, and her unwavering determination to protect what was hers. Together, the Alpha King and his chosen queen would face whatever challenges awaited: the Silver Circle's continued threat, the mystery of Queen Isabella's murder, the everyday challenges of ruling a vast kingdom. But they would face it as true mates, bound not just by ceremony or politics or even fate, but by a choice freely made and a love hard-won. And in that bond lay a power greater than any magic the Silver Circle could hope to wield, the power of 2 souls who had found in each other not just salvation, but home. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.